Hey, good morning everybody. We're here today, another Insights. Adrian Orr, Reserve Bank Governor. So Adrian, what's health and safety got to do with the Governor of the Reserve Bank?
At a personal level, everything. From my own life, I haven't always been the Governor, funnily enough, so I've spent many years on different labour forces and different roles, and I'd have to say well-being is really the reason we go to work. Why would you go to work if it wasn't to try and enhance well-being of the individual?
So, when you think about well-being for New Zealand in your Reserve Bank role, sort of short-term thinking versus long-term thinking, what would you say are the key elements of well-being?
I think it's a great question because we are too often operating in the short term. That's what we're incentivised to do. It's profit, profit, profit. It's delivery, it's output, all day, every day. And businesses will say, we're here to make money, we're not here to make friends. So, all of these trite type of sayings. But life has moved on, society has moved on, and many businesses globally have moved on to the long term now. And the long term, it really is about, am I able to attract, retain and motivate the people that I need to do my job? Retain actually means you might have some well-being considerations in there, health and safety, mental, physical well-being, are all critical to that job. And if you can get into this beautiful virtuous circle where economic growth and or profit absolutely sponsors the environment, sponsors inclusion, sponsors diversity in the labour force, sponsors well-being, that is a very positive virtuous circle that I believe people are really craving to get hold of these days.
Yeah, so it's all about retaining talent, but you also talked in there about longevity of thinking. So interestingly enough, I met with a CE in the forestry sector, and he talked about the commodity cycle in New Zealand and actually how traditionally labour is commoditised really. So they talk about wanting your labour on and off because you don't know what the log price is going to do, and how they move from, I think it was 6 or 8 month contract to a three-year contract and the difference it made to productivity, training, capability and outputs. So how can businesses think about this long-termism when they've got dramatic changes in the composition of their workplace and people moving in and out?
You've stolen everything that I would be telling someone. I mean, the forestry sector is a lovely example where you're right, short-termism delivered. You had a person, a saw, if the price was right, you had to cut the tree and it was out. Now, and I know well because the New Zealand Super Fund was the main owner of Kaingaroa Forest and I was the CEO of the Super Fund, and we spent a lot of time around community wellbeing, health and safety, and trying to create a longer horizon. And what it meant was productivity, because you had a trained labour force who were engaged and felt appreciated. You had people prepared to commit capital into machinery and equipment. I mean, the safety record of forestry has gone from abysmal to something that is starting to look sustainable. You had longer term capital commitments, you had healthier communities, you had people whose mum and dad would return at the end of the day, you had a career starting to develop, and you had a labour force which was going to be sustainable intergenerationally. Now that's Kaingaroa, that's not all forests. And you still are seeing forests, both in New Zealand and internationally as an example, where communities are still being jerked around by short-term behaviour. Insurance is your personal problem, bring your own truck, we're not really worrying too much what it looks like. And that's a vicious circle, that's not a virtuous circle on the way through. You will not get the environmental care you need, you will not get the labour force, the inclusion you need. It just doesn't happen. So the only difference is horizon. Do you care about the labour that you're employing? Do you care about the continuity and the skills that we need? Do you care about the level of capital that needs to be invested? Do you care about the mess you're going to leave behind, whether it's through a community incident or environmental? You will care about those if you're worried about a 3 to 5 year horizon and more.
So I'm a small business in New Zealand. 80% go out of business, according to all of the media, and within the first year. How can I think about this? Because currently I think it's a compliance cost and it's a cost on me.
I believe it's on the edge, probably because you haven't been thinking that way. I'd almost flip it on its head. I'd be saying, what is my value proposition to my customer or my community, how can I use that value proposition as a competitive difference, a competitive advantage? Too often we look at health and safety or well-being as a cost to business, not as an enabler of business. So if you are out there saying, oh, I've got something that is just environmentally unique, or I'm showing better concern for the people who I'm employing, it reflects very quickly on the customer. I'll use a glib example. You go to an Irish pub where it's still the single owner, the principal running it. It wouldn't matter if you sat on an empty beer crate. You're going to have great service, people are going to be really concerned about you, you'll have a community conversation. That's very different to a minimum wage, 30% turnover per annum, multi-million dollar Irish pub. Too often that, the kaitiaki spirit is lost. And it's lost because it's no longer the principal who's really engaged with the business. And by principal, I mean the owner, the shareholder, or in that case, the single owner that I used. If the shareholder is highly divorced from the business itself, then it's very hard to have that concern, that culture, those responsible investment pieces that you as an owner really respect, reflected in your business.
Yeah, so what you're actually saying is that small businesses run in a caring way is a competitive advantage.
Very much so. I mean, a small business, if you're just dumping the rubbish out the back of your fish and chip shop, you're going to find out about it soon. If you're underpaying or mistreating people, you're not going to be able to employ anyone. If you are providing crap service, you aren't going to be serving anyone.
So if you are the fund manager or the owner of the capital or the board of directors, I guess, of an organisation, and you are in those long supply chains or in those models, what can you do to put the focus or effort into measuring and looking at these things that you're saying are incredibly high value, create much greater productivity in the long term and much more productive businesses? What can you do?
Well, I think you can do a lot more than what is generally done. So you can insist with the people you've entrusted with your money responsible investing behaviours. And it's about saying, we know ourselves, these are our basic principles, our hygiene issues, and we will not invest with you unless you can show us how you're meeting those hurdles. If you can't, you're ruled out. If you say we can, we need time, we will watch and work with you. And that is creating change.
What we're sort of observing is the younger generation coming through, the millennials and others, these things are really important to them, increasingly important to them. The group that's still dying and potentially is challenged by this concept, say in agriculture, is the 55 plus age group actually.
Old men with motorbikes.
Yeah, quad bikes and tractors and not wearing seatbelts and thinking this is all a load of crap sort of stuff. When you look at that group of people, their perception that this is all about, that our culture is all about risk-taking and innovation, and somehow we're going to stifle this with focusing on health and safety and compliance.
So if anything comes through compliance, it's resisted. That's the annoying thing. If it's positively incentivised, it's encouraged. And so you have to have a bit of both. When you're going into, say, the farming sector, you've got the owner-operator, and you've got, she'll be right, I've done this for 50 years, what could possibly go wrong? And that is, you don't have the board of directors that you can start to enforce disciplines upon or reporting requirements upon, and so on. Now it's becoming a managerial career for farmers. You don't have to own the farm. In fact, it's almost impossible to own the farm these days at the prices. But you're actually going to get a management career and be trained in all of these things around financial, reputational, operational, health and safety, risk management.
Yep.
You become a true manager. So it's about trying to shift through. Don't be the hero. And so we had just simple ways of being able to report incidents. I fell off my bike because I hit a pipe that wasn't there. Well, it was. You just fell off the bike. And perhaps a sign would do.
Yeah, and what I really like about what you described there is it's not suddenly you have to eliminate all your risks. It's about sort of getting visibility to what's going on and then systematically having a mindset that says we will work to eliminate or reduce those most significant harms and then systematically work on improving.
That's right. I mean, what gets measured gets managed. So sit down and think, what is important to measure over what horizon? And then you can start managing towards that. Yep. Is it really fine to say we're happy to put up with 2 deaths a year in forestry. Well, no, you should have zero tolerance. So we are aiming for something which says people do not die when they're in the forest. And then that sets the benchmark to say, well, how can we start making that happen?
So, I mean, that's a good thing to raise, these supply chains. And we've got disrupt happening, and people are going to be, the workforce will probably, people won't stay in jobs for life, they will change jobs rapidly. All of the things we know are, more contracting type work. How, as the leader or the person that has the ability to influence this, how can you think about this in the context of, I might not have the same people, so my workforce might be changing, I need different types of skills, I'm bringing people in and out.
Well, I mean, it's, again, why not think about it as a glass half full opportunity where you can say, this is my kaupapa. When you cross the line and come and be involved with me, this is how we roll. And so it doesn't really matter who's coming in and out. What it does is it puts a much stronger discipline around your use of temporary labour, contract labour. When they're coming in and out of the floor, it's no purpose just to say, hey, you're my full-time employee, so I have to care about you, but not the person sitting beside you, the contractor. You have to have the whole of the work site or what you do. And shout that from the rooftops to your customer as well as your employees and your community, because people will want to come and work for you. They'll say, wow, I would really love to be doing my contract work with who? And that is the true competition for labour now, because it's a flip-sided thing. We're not sitting here commanding the resources that we want, we're sitting here begging for the resources we need.
So talent is a scarce resource, it will get even scarcer, and actually this is the differentiating factor will be your care for your workers.
Strongly believe it will be, and there's global cases there. Not only for for your workers is critical, but that reflects into the community. What are you putting back into the community? It reflects for what are you doing to the environment? How are you being inclusive with who's involved? We can show leadership across the health and welfare around long-termism, and I think our the Te Ao Māori help us a lot as well if we embrace a lot of that longer term thinking.
New Zealand's only just tipping into this area of mental health, wellbeing, bullying and harassment. Countries that are well ahead of us, Canada and the UK for example, would say there's 7 times as much productivity loss from mental health and wellbeing to, workplace accidents. What's your view from your perspective around where that fits in this continuum and the role of workplaces in supporting and managing that?
Sitting here in a suit jacket, mental well-being is by far the largest concern for maintaining a culture and a team who are going to kick butt. And too often everyone has a story, and there's always stresses at different times, different paces going on within any group of people, and you've got to create a culture where we truly care for each other. And to instill that into a corporate culture is really, really critical. And you need to invest. You can't just say running around and saying, I don't care. You have to be able to provide training, you have to provide access to assistance, you have to manage and monitor the workloads, pressures, because that truly matters.
Yeah, and the other thing in that is it's very individual. So there isn't one size fits all.
And there's no physical signs. You go, oh my God, look, I've just lost an arm. Well, it doesn't happen that way.
Yeah.
Someone might have just lost a family member. And unless people are comfortable to talk about things. Inclusion and diversity is so complex yet so critical. The times we've all had moments where we suddenly thought, I don't really belong here, or I'm not worthy. And to recognise those moments and rectify those moments makes such a difference to connectivity and mental health.
So in New Zealand, we're working towards being the best in the world at health and safety. When you look globally, economically, at what the best in the world looks like in terms of economic thinking and sustainability, what does that look like?
It's a great question, and the answer is it depends. All countries have got certain things which are truly global best practice. I would say no country has got everything that is their global best practice. And what you're seeing now is both you've got industry, you've got civil society, you've got bureaucrat and politician groups starting to work together much, much better for the same outcomes. NGOs are no longer against this, they're now with this. Unions are no longer against this, they're now with this. We're all after the same outcome.
Yep. Well, thanks, Adrian. Hey, and thanks to you. Look out for Insights number 5 coming shortly. See ya.
And be safe out there.